This is going to be a shorter one, but before you can play, especially if you're a new player, you need to select a role and a champion that you're going to play. And we're going to talk about what the different roles in the game are, what they entail, um, the wide variety that you can see in League, and how kind of interesting the game can be because of all of the different things that can be played in different positions, and the different ways that there are to play different roles. And hopefully, this will give you an idea as a new player of roles that you should pick, or if you're a lower rated player, of roles that you probably should be thinking about switching to playing while you can still have the opportunity to play those things first to learn the game. Um, and maybe make sure that you're playing something that you enjoy and that fits what you want to do. So there are 5 roles in League of Legends, and it's quite interesting because even though I'm going to go over how each role is kind of usually defined, you can play all kinds of different styles in different roles, and that's one of the interesting things about League of Legends. So we have 3 different lanes in the game. We have top lane, mid lane, and bot lane. And within top lane, it's a 1v1 lane, and it's on the side, so it becomes a longer lane. And basically, it sits in top lane kind of as an island, a 1v1 brawl away from everybody else on the map. Um, and you see a lot of champions in top lane that are kind of fighter style champions that have a mix of damage and a little bit of tankiness, or like bruisers, which are similar to that, and and tanks as well sometimes, although we're not in a very tank oriented meta currently. And so those are the type of champions that you might expect to see in top. However, many different champions can be played in different roles. So you can see support champions or supportive style champions top. You can see champions top that are like more like mages. All of these things are different possibilities. Even marksmen or AD carries can go top because they can bully some of those melee champions in lane. And so all kinds of possibilities open up, but these are generally what the roles are like. And we'll talk about why which role makes sense at certain elos, things like that. Top happens to be the least played role in the game right now. Um, that's just what it is. Top laners usually take teleport or ignite now, but teleport has been changed. And teleport is a spell that allows you to um, teleport to a different part of the map. In the beginning of the game now, the change that they made is you can only teleport to areas, you can only teleport to turrets um, for the first 14 minutes of the game, and so that makes it more difficult to teleport around the map, to get a flank early in the game to have an impact. So usually a champion that's taking teleport in the later stages of the game is going to go to the opposite side of the map of the important objective that's up, and then push that lane to create pressure on the opposite side of the map, and then teleport to the objective if they need to. And so if you end up taking teleport or playing top lane where you're likely to take teleport, you're likely to end up even later in the game, even if you're on the other side of the map, staying by yourself and then teleporting into a fight when it's necessary, not necessarily playing with your team. So this is a role for someone who likes fighter champions, likes a little bit of beefiness and tankiness, doesn't want to just like one-shot each other, but you're looking for a real skill-expressive fight in a 1v1 situation over a long period of time where you're not relying on your teammates and you're not interacting with your teammates as much. And honestly, the easiest way I think for anybody to pick a role is really to find a champion that you love to play and a role that that champion works in best. A lot of champions even can be played in multiple roles, but a lot of champions really have one predominant role that they were kind of designed for, or maybe 2 roles, and you'll pick one that works the best for you with that champion. And so I would really recommend, for picking your role, even though I'm going to go through all this information about them, really would recommend just trying different champions in the game and finding one that you think is really fun. And that's something that we overlook, especially players who have played the game a little bit. You're in gold, or even me. There are champions I haven't played at all since the mastery system came out years and years and years ago. There's probably a dozen or so champions I've just never even played once. as a master player, and some of them are newer champions like Zeri and things like that. So I don't have it. There are some champions that I have never played a single game on, and that's kind of incredible because I could try one of those champions and it could be my favorite thing in the world and I wouldn't even know it. So it's important to not keep a closed mind and try different stuff if you can while you're a new player, and find what you really like to do, because the best advice I can give anyone on getting better at League is the main thing that's going to cause you to get better at League is playing the game more. And the only way you're going to play the game more is if you enjoy playing the game. And that means finding a champion or a couple of champions that you really enjoy playing, that you like switching between, or the one champion you would love to grind no matter how many games you play. And that's the champion you're going to get good on because you're actually going to be able to play the game enough. So that's top lane. Jungle is a role that exists that doesn't have a lane. You're in between the lanes and you're fighting neutral camps. And because of the fact that you're farming neutral camps all game instead of laning versus someone, it's a role that, especially in my personal opinion, but just in general this is true, lends itself to not developing you well enough as a player. And so I don't recommend that people start out playing jungle. I would really recommend that you start out playing mid or top, because when you play mid or top, as opposed to playing AD carry, which we'll get into, you're not dependent on another person. You're just in a 1v1 lane, and everything that happens is up to you for the most part, right? It's as determined by you as it can be, and it's going to be the most mechanically intensive and demanding role that you can play. And so those are lanes that you should look to play if you're a new player, or if you're, silver, or I would even say gold. Get into one of those roles, learn how to play the game, the proper fundamentals of playing the game and laning versus people, and then branch out. If you're the type of person who wants to play AD carry champions, then once you've learned some of those fundamentals of trading and laning and CSing, then switch to playing AD carry champions. If you're a support, learn the fundamentals of hitting people with abilities and laning, and actually having to go through the process of CSing and understanding what goes on in people's heads when they're looking to CS, and learning how to punish people when they walk up to hit a minion. Then go into support and apply those concepts in the role that you want to do. Same thing with jungle. Learn the mechanics through top lane, through fighting people, even playing similar champions and stuff like that. And then once you have better mechanics, because you've spent all this time fighting against players 1v1, then switch into the jungle and focus on learning the pathing. And when you do end up fighting people on jungle, the small percentage of the time that you end up fighting people, you'll be better at it because you've already practiced it a lot by laning. So jungle is a role where you're just fighting PvE a lot of the time, because you're just clearing through these camps and no one's contesting that necessarily, and you're just going to be running through clearing your camps, and then you're going to be looking to gank lanes, which means you're looking to find an opponent who's pushed up too far, maybe doesn't have a ward or doesn't look at their map, and you try to get behind them or get onto them in the lane, and you roam around the map looking to make action happen for your team, looking for positive plays for your team, where you can catch people off guard and kill them in between doing these camps for the extra gold and experience for your team. But again, that means that you're fighting less often because these opportunities aren't happening all the time, and you have to weave in doing camps in between them, and so you're farming uncontested versus no one most of the time, unless the enemy jungler comes into your jungle and starts fighting you. And, yes, that can happen, but even though counter jungling is a thing, and it happens, half the time counter jungling just involves the enemy jungler taking a camp that you're not at. You don't end up fighting them. And if you do end up fighting them, your team will collapse and it'll turn into an actual fight amongst multiple people or something like that, or you will just have to back off and give the camp even if you're both there, or you'll be able to fight them and kill them, but you spend such a small percentage of the time fighting people that you really do lose out on practicing mechanics. Then you've got mid lane, which is a 1v1 lane like top lane, but the advantage of playing mid lane is that there's a different pool of champions available to you in the mid lane. So in the mid lane you have like mages, assassins, But you can also play some of the stuff like top lane, some bruisers, some fighters, some tanks. I'll touch on the jungle champion pool too, because I didn't. Jungle champion pool is a large focus on, similar to top lane, a lot of champions, fighters, tanks, things with CC, because when you gank someone, you're going to need to be able to lock them down. You're going to be able to need to secure the kill. So champions that have a lot of mobility and ability to crowd control people, to CC them, lock them down. That's what you're going to find in the jungle. So going back to mid lane, right, you have a little bit of a different pool of champions, and there's a reason for that. The reason for that is because mid lane is shorter because it's running through the middle instead of curving, and because it's shorter and it's in the middle of the map, you can leave mid lane, and if you can leave mid lane, you can run either bot or top, and then gank those lanes and have an impact like the jungler. So because you're in a centralized location, you can roam and affect the rest of the map in a huge impactful way. And that means that you need to be able to clear your wave quickly and get lane priority by shoving your wave out. Even if you're not looking to roam, making sure that your opponent can't by shoving the wave in. And that means you have to have a lot of wave clear. So you have to have, kind of these control mage situations going on, where you pick these control mages who can clear the minion wave really fast and lock their opponent down in lane, or clear the wave really fast and then roam and have properties like the junglers do, a little bit of setup, a little bit of CC, and a lot of damage to be able to make plays happen for your team and the rest of the map. So that's what you're looking like, with mid, and it's also a 1v1 role like top lane. So it's a good role for developing your mechanics on your own and getting to practice fighting directly versus an opponent. And then we've got bot lane, and bot lane has two roles in it. You have two players sharing XP in the bot lane, and that's an AD carry and a support. And the reason for this is because AD carry champions are very weak 1v1, and so they can't really survive laning phase, most of them, super easily on their own, especially the ones that scale the hardest, that get better later into the game. Those are the best AD carries because they don't do all this damage in lane and then fall off. Well, those AD carries, as a consequence, they've been designed to be weaker early in the game and stronger later in the game, and in order to get them there, they need some sort of protection. And so essentially how this developed was that if you put an AD carry versus a lot of these top lane champions and things like that, they're going to get killed 1v1, they're going to have a tough time laning, and they're not going to be able to get the appropriate amount of gold that they need. And what AD carry champions need, this is something I should say is important, mid lane champions are really reliant on XP, on levels, to get more damage. The more you level up your abilities, you get a lot of extra damage. AD carries are more item or gold dependent, meaning that while both AD carries and mid laners get extra damage from getting more items and more gold, and they get more damage from stats from leveling up, mid laners get more of a benefit from stats and leveling up in general as a whole, and AD carries get more advantage from buying items and scaling later into the game. So what that means is that AD carries can afford to lose the experience that they give up by not being in a solo lane in order to gain potentially extra gold, and in order to have the protection of a support who can help them through the early game and get them into the later stages of the game, at which point the AD carry can really do a lot in a team fight to carry the game, because an AD carry is meant to be your damage per second on the team. They're going to be the person who's constantly able to output damage. So another difference between AD carries and a lot of champions is that most champions are front-loaded damage, which means that they use all their abilities, do a bunch of damage, and then their abilities are on cooldown for 10 seconds, and so they don't do any damage anymore. Whereas an AD carry will not do very much damage the first time they hit you, but they'll do the same amount of damage the second time and the third time and the fourth time and the fifth time, etc. So they're constantly outputting this stream of damage throughout a fight to give their team consistent fighting power and damage that will help carry you through a fight and win you the game. So AD carry is a conservative role. You have to be very safe. It's a very dangerous role to play because everyone's going to try to focus you to kill you. You're a very vulnerable type of champion, very immobile, very squishy, not a lot of HP, no tankiness, no nothing. So you have to position properly in order to survive. You have to play safe, and you have to farm well in order to get items. But once you do those things, if you position correctly, if you farm up and get good items, you're going to carry the game because you're going to do all of the damage in a fight. And that's really important. So that's what AD carry does, right? And then support, their partner, is a role that doesn't need gold or XP. You don't need either. You have a lot of inherent base power from the first few levels that you get, your ultimate ability and things like that, that allow, and your very cheap items, that allow you to do a lot without very many resources. And what you do on support is provide vision for your team so that your team doesn't lose objectives, so that you can walk into places confidently, so that you know where the enemy team is. Protect your AD carry in the lane, but also, like the mid laner and the jungler, be able to roam around the map, especially link up with your jungler, and at higher levels be able to leave your AD carry who's competent and able to farm and like lane on their own for a little while, even if it means they have to play safe or lose some CS or even walk off tower and lose a wave. If it means that your support can roam and get a nice play mid that gets a kill, or roam top and get a play, or with their jungler and invade the enemy jungler, the support can make a lot happen because they can sacrifice so much XP to just run around the map and cause chaos. And it's kind of, like having a second jungler be able to run around the map and gank people when they really don't expect it, even at higher elos, because they expect the jungler to be able to gank them, but all of a sudden they just saw the jungler on the other side of the map, but now the support's on their side of the map, and so they thought they could play aggressive, but they get punished for it because the support's there. Things like that. Huge power in that role. But again, supports don't have to CS to get gold, which is just like jungle. Jungle doesn't have to last hit to get gold or contest CS. So supports kind of get gold for free without having to CS. So you don't have to worry about that mechanic. And unfortunately, because you don't think about that mechanic, a lot of times, especially at lower elos and lower ranked supports, aren't thinking about properly punishing people when they walk up to hit CS. So again, just like with jungle, I would recommend focusing on top and mid first before you switch to support, so that you can get those lane fundamentals down, so that you can understand the game better, and then switch over to the role once you've already proven that you're decent at the other parts of the game. Because unfortunately, a lot of the problem with support players, and I would say with junglers too, but especially with support players, I will say, is that the support players and the junglers don't have good mechanics because they spend so little time fighting properly versus another person. And if you learn those things first, if you learn how people think, how people lane, what to do, those things are going to help you transition into the role and be a much better player than if you just start playing support from the beginning. So those are the roles. But again, I think the most important piece of advice is try out a bunch of different champions, find the champions that you like to play the most, and stick with those champions. And hopefully you can build a pool of, one or two champions in a specific role that you really like to play. And don't worry about playing too many different champions. It's okay if you only want to focus on one champion. The less champions you play, the better, because you'll learn how to use that champion's abilities, how tanky that champion is, and what they can get away with and can't get away with, how much damage people do to that champion at certain items and stuff. You'll learn that first so that you can stop paying attention to that stuff and start paying attention to the map, start paying attention to the game and where people are and where people are moving. And if you can get there, then you'll start learning the game. And that's better than if you're playing 20 different champions, and so each time you switch your champion pickup, you're still learning the champion, and it takes you years and years and years to be able to focus on what's going on in the game. So very important, if you can, to focus on one champion. Once you get to a higher rank, worry about expanding your champion pool and learning the other champions. And that'll become easier the other way around anyways, because you'll know how to play the game. You'll know where people are and moving and stuff like that. You're not going to die as much. So then it's just a question of like, okay, well, how much damage do I do, and how much damage do people do to me, and how do I use these abilities and what timing and stuff like that. It doesn't become such a big deal. So find champions that you love to play the game a lot, and you're gonna have a good time. And probably you just end up playing the role that your beloved champions fall into, unless you just really resonated with one of these descriptions of the roles that I provided. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully we'll start to get into some serious content about the actual game, and I'm looking forward to that.